So this is Orange, New South Wales station. Passengers waiting to catch the train to Sydney, stopping at Bathurst on the way, and the train is just coming in now towards the station in this wonderful city. Why it's called Orange, I don't know. I think it's Orange River. And here comes last year when I was over here in Orange, staying at Sydney, coming to Orange, I phoned Graham White, who by all accounts is the leader in Orange, the PBCC leader, and Bruce Hales sent him over to England to take fellowship meetings in Leeds, where I lived, in Christmas 2015. And he hailed the arrival of White in Leeds as a white Christmas. And I was full of hope because I'd been rebuked by the Leeds Assembly, led by Garth Christie, Roger Edwards and Chris Tutterheim. In the January, my son Jed had been over in Sydney for the whole year, having treatment on his leg and having a new type of leg fitted, which I was never too happy about, to be honest. But the whole thing was taken out of my hands. I'd done all I could to help my dear son, went through the whole episode with him. It was a traumatic time, understood by the brethren universally. And he'd just come back from Sydney, a year in Sydney, getting his leg done, Christmas 15, followed by Mr. White. And having been rebuked in the January, just before Jed left, I thought, well, maybe there's going to be a time of purity and help and whiteness, you know, have a great time. So we duly had a meeting, a big fellowship meeting, brethren there from all over Europe, all come to hear Mr. White. And in the meeting, unusually, a question of sexual abuse came up. A dear brother whose wife was victim, who had spoken to me about it very feelingly, and I'd taken the matter to Bruce Hales in London in a hotel meeting in June 15. And I know about that, he said. Maybe it's time that this particular brother, who was being withdrawn from due to the matter, should come back into fellowship. Afterwards, Garth was there at the meeting. He said, I'll take this up with the Preston brethren, leave it to me. I said, well, it's a matter of rejoicing if a man's coming back into fellowship, Garth. But he would seem very miserable about it, as usual, probably because I was involved. He always had a problem with me right from boyhood. The train's just going off now, off to Sydney. And Garth obviously had a problem. I think maybe it might have been to do with the fact that I had 4 boys, he had 1. He didn't seem to be able to have as many kids as me. I don't know. But for whatever motive, he always liked to be in control and always had a higher place than me in the local church, which is fine. And was leading it with an iron rod. In the last few years I was there, in fact, right from Oliver Smaldon's days, although David Meatyard, who was a nice brother, he had a slight interlude. But when Bruce Hales came to Leeds in Christmas 2002, when the review was starting, Garth was very much the man he nominated, and Garth is still in position. And this is what happens. Graham White's the same. If you get into Hales's good books, you get a running salary because brethren from around the world minister to you in their care meetings. And I used to suggest names, and I used to enjoy that sort of thing because it's showing some appreciation in a way. But when it's all part of a business empire and the qualifications are licking Bruce Hales' arse, excuse me, not moral qualifications, not the truth, all about persons, one kind of loses faith in the system because it's like a money-go-round, a merry-go-round, a money-go-round. And of course, I used to get a few gifts every now and again from more outlandish localities, not the big ones like Sydney. yeah, I suppose one or two noticed things that I did, and hopefully there were moral reasons. I used to stick my neck out and say things weren't right, even if it did hurt the hierarchy. But nevertheless, back to Graham White, we were told that he was dealing with the matter. So I rang him last year when I was over, 2023, and said, Graham, here I am. What are you doing about the sexual abuse matter that you were meant to be resolving in Christmas 2015? Splutter, splutter, splutter. Just like what happened with Bruce Hales when I put it to him. Garth Christie said he was dealing with the matter. But of course it's got to go straight to the police. And every sexual abuse matter in the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, I raised at least two matters of sexual abuse at the same interview with Bruce Hales in London in 2015, witnessed by Hazels, John Rich and Christie's. The witness I wanted to take was refused entrance. So you can see how dodgy a religion is if the leader can choose his witnesses and request that others do not attend. And this even came up in court, in the Leeds courts in January 2023. Neil Christie was asked specifically about the interview and who arranged it, and he evaded the questions. He was asked who the leader of the Brethren was. Oh, we don't have leader, we have elders, you know. It sounded so beautifully mutual to the outside world, but there's not a bit of it. There's the strongest hierarchy, far stronger than any mainstream church that I know, and I've been to a few, I've knocked on a few doors, as with the Archbishop of Bathurst. Not the Archbishop, the Bishop of Bathurst, who's got jurisdiction over a lot of New South Wales. Yesterday had a good interview with him. He's very sympathetic with what I'm going through, but not that he can do too much. But there's a lot of sympathy in mainstream churches for victims of the abuse of cults. Anyway, back to Graham White. I wrote a letter to him, left it for him at Geoffrey White's shed. And I also wrote to Colin Pascoe, who's a respected brother here, been here for decades, as long as I remember, and always been the brother, actually, that we would have thought would have been used to lead the position in Orange, but his nose was put out of joint by Bruce Hales, I think, soon after he came into position, and Graham White was installed, and there might be others. I don't really know, but they were the big names in my career, which was from which I was sacked, you might say, call it a career if you like, amongst the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, which is most of my lifetime, and I'm not accepting that I've been withdrawn from, because I haven't been withdrawn from for any right reason, no witness, no issue that I recognised, so I'm protesting loud and clear, and I thought that Graham would have followed matters up and put it right, and we had him into our house, entertained, had 63 visitors in, including Jamie Wearmouth, who was killed in the Russell Stewart accident a few months, if not weeks later, and he said that it was the best time he'd ever had in his life. Well, I feel honoured to have had our brother, and I'd love to make contact with his father. I'd love to make contact with lots of brethren in Orange. I'm not against them, I'm not against Graham White, I'm just telling the truth that he's got a big responsibility on his shoulders to stamp out sexual abuse with the help of the police in any place he's been to, including Leeds. If there's any sexual abuse in Orange, and from what I've heard there is, Bathurst, his area of responsibility, and that brings up another question as to the Beatties. I've written to the Beattie brothers in Bathurst about the awful treatment of the Betcher family who left South Africa to join the Brethren, stay with the Brethren in 1999, when Bruce Hales deemed that the place was too violent for the Brethren to stay. Well, Bruce Hales, can you be sure there's no violence over here, please? I've been shown violence by your son Gareth outside your house, who lied, and your other son Charles lied and said that I was there to burn your house down and fire a cap through your brain, a cap, meaning a bullet, and wanted to have sex with a sister in England. Never even thought about having sex with her. So these lies and false charges are very serious, and the covering up of sexual abuse is very serious. And of course the brethren report publicly, on public, through Merrick Lloyd Grimshaw, that I was the perpetrator of the problem outside Bruce Hale's house. Lance Christie, oh, not Gareth. We protect the leader. We always, truth or not, we always protect the leader. We protect Bruce Hales. We protect Gareth Hales, the leader in waiting, possibly, or Charles, or whoever it is. I'm not bothered. Like we protected Jim Taylor Jr. at the time of Aberdeen. Well, that was a monstrous offence to brethren teaching when the issue came, because he was caught in bed with a married sister and it was witnessed. The issue was that we had to agree that it was all right, brothers had to agree it's all right for the leader to take his wife to bed with him if he wanted. Any sister, and that was the test of Aberdeen really, because he's so pure, any of us would let our wives in to bed with him. And of course, if you ever said that anything other than that he was the man of God, the Paul of our day, the pure elect vessel of the testimony, the minister of the Lord of the recovery, as Bruce Hales has coined himself to be, the man of God, if we ever half doubted that, or a quarter, or had the fleeting most thought that it might not be true, woof, they were onto us like a ton of bricks. So I'm challenging all this nonsense and saying they should line up with the truth. If there's sexual abuse, if it's adulation of a man, if it's bullying, if it's priestly visits, that's abuse. Every priestly visit I had was sheer abuse. Every withdrawal in the church, as far as I'm concerned, I submit, has been abuse. It's bullying tactics, it's schoolyard tactics. Bruce Hales turns against people, hates them, and then gets his hierarchy that is installed in every place, every locality around the world to boot you out, and you lose your family, you lose your life, you want to commit suicide, you feel like, you just feel wrecked and ruined by a man who carries on destroying families and makes more and more money doing it because he gets hold of the assets, and then people have signed the wills over to him and over to his hierarchy, so there's just no let up. So back to the Beatties, I'm taking issue with them over the way they've treated, Duncan, John Carruth, when he was in Newcastle, treated him abysmally. John Carruth was a wonderful evangelist, used to preach the glad tidings in a very fine way. I've said it before, when he preached, the children stopped crying. There was a hush in the room. That's a man with the Spirit of God. That's a man who's got power, the power of the glory of the glad tidings, far superior to Bruce Hales and his cronies. But of course, these guys become a threat, so they have to be booted out. And at the time I was shut up, I was on the phone to John Carruth, advocating for him, putting him in touch with a financial advisor that I knew, who was very concerned that John Carruth had been treated abysmally despite the being witness of that with his son and family. And he was supportive of me stepping in to try and protect Linda and Ian, his children, from abuse from the Leeds priests. And they've abused me, of course, same people, Roger Edwards, Garth Christie, Richard Anderson, then, who had a wonderful father, and I'm afraid that those lads have lost the moral plot somewhat because they're having to pander to the hierarchy in the form of their uncle now, Clive Anderson. Now those guys need to get out of Clive's control, because Clive is trustee of the meeting room, trustee of Bible and Gospel Trust, and he's right up there. But those lads need to have their own link and go back to their father. And think Ross was what stood tall in Leeds. Great man. I was in school with him, and we had fun as well. I remember the time when he asked me, we had a French teacher called Madame Pritchard in French, and we were in the same class, Ross and I was sat next to him, and I was called Bruno. She said, Bruno. I didn't know what she was talking about. I just turned to Ross. What do I say now? And he said, Fermez la bouche, madame. So I'm best French. Fermez la bouche, madame. And I remember now, she said, "Oh, Bruno." We've had a few laughs. I remember when Garth decided to ring Mr. Longbottom on the home phone when we were lads, and so Garth, in his terrible way, I wish he was could see a bit of humour these days, rang, and Longbottom answered. "Hello, Longbottom here." Garth said, "Oh, is that Mr. Shortbottom?" "No, Longbottom here." "Oh, I thought it was Shortbottom." "No." And of course the guy was more and more perplexed. We put the phone down. Naughty boys, but we forgive that sort of stuff. But we don't forgive spiritual abuse. We don't forgive wearing people down to nothing through priestly visits. That needs exposing so that we can forgive. We cannot forgive until we know the truth, and that's just basic fundamental Christianity. And if you're run by bullies and you're scared of your leaders, stand up to them. That's what you do with bullies. You've got to stand up to them, find the power to do it. And if you're doing it on scriptural grounds, it's perfectly right to ask questions in assemblies, perfectly right to raise questions about conduct of one another. And John Hales and Scripture supported that. Do it in a respectful way, and you can bring the house down. And that's what's needed, absolutely. So I've been to the jail in Bathurst to visit Colin Betcher, asked him whether any brethren were visiting him, in view of the fact he's moved over from South Africa, whether his wife was visiting him. No, not at all, because this big wall of separation has come down in Bathurst between Colin and his wife, between Colin and the brethren, and he's the loveliest guy. You know, just the other video I was suggesting that the Bathurst brethren should have a vote system like the cathedral does for nominating people with responsibility in that church. And I can tell you now that if I was in Bathurst, I would vote for Colin Betcher. He's the most bright Christian. His father was upstanding. John Hales described him as the president when he was in South Africa. And old man Betcher was one of the most upright guys. And I can witness that David Betcher in Mandeville, Jamaica, is one of the most upright, loveliest guys you'll ever meet. I've been out there, stayed with him, stayed with the Dialis, and there was also Philip Betcher, who was was withdrawn from, along with all these other Betchers. So they move out with the brethren, all withdrawn from at the word of Bruce Hales, super preachers like John Cruise was, the sorts that would get your souls to Christ, and they've all been pushed out. So I've actually, in this case of Philip, it's very serious, and I've raised this with Duncan Beattie, who, as I say, is very responsible. He actually went to my father's house, my mother's house, first visitors they had after being withdrawn from, so a year after, who should turn up but Duncan Beattie. So he knew what my parents were going through, and now he's put his lot in with Bruce Hales, staunch supporter, going around doing his nasty work, doing his dirty work, and ruining the lives of people like John Carruth, who was a much adored minister in Simonton's day, and right through John Hales's day until Bruce came on the scene and got rid of the standing ministers, those that we respected. So you have to turn with a hierarchy. If Bruce Hales says Lance Christie's a bad lot, a heretic, and all the other abuse, the worst opposer in the history of the country, they all drink it up, drink it in. Oh yeah, and we support Bruce Hales. It's very serious to have a doubt. So there's no fair hearing, no chance of a fair hearing for me. So I've applied for fellowship, actually. I've actually applied to my latest meeting for fellowship. And they'll have to decide whether they can cope with me. If I'm like Colin Betcher, too bad or too good, or whatever they want to say for the religion, let us know, please. Because they've had me in jail, just like they've got Colin in jail. So me and others in Bathurst have written into the jail, written to the Minister of Police, told them about the brethren, told them about Colin's predicament, and told them that he wants to be back with his wife, who was Lydia Francis from New York. Lovely woman, but so compliant, like my wife was, to brethren teaching, separation teaching, which says that if the leader turns against your husband and says he's a bad person, you support the testimony, support the leader, support the leader's sons, support the hierarchy in the place. And if your husband is a victim to it, so be it. So that's breaking up families. And I'm convinced, just as I say I am with Ernie Hughes and Joe Hughes from Rangiora, I'm convinced that Colin Betcher and Lydia Betcher are married and they each want to be together, but the big thing standing in between them is the wall of separation. And that's what I'm trying to break down, because it means that information and truth is not getting inside the Brethren Church. And that means that the leaders and Bruce Hales can get away with blue murder. And it's not right, it must stop. And we're ready to forgive as soon as the truth is out. Aberdeen needs absolutely exposing, because the bullies just run the narrative and insist that everybody agrees that Jim Taylor was pure. He was not pure. And his talk in the meetings, breasts, bums, toilet paper, was from the gutter. And the